Chapter 7. Give Up. Beyond the garden was an even greater brightness of the sea. Gilgamesh stood toe to toe with the surf and stared out across the water, perplexed. The sea? He had heard of it, but never seen it. He looked around for help. Then he saw it, a seafront bar, its terrace overhung with vines. There was a wine press, too. Whoever lived here clearly grew the grapes, pressed them, and fermented the wine before selling it to passers-by. What passers-by? A woman as big as an oak cask sat skimming the scum off of a vat of newly pressed juice. A veil concealed all but her big bare feet. Gilgamesh could not see her face through the veil, but she could see him. As he came into view, she straightened a little, then throwing down her skimmer and hoisting up her skirt, she ran for the safety of the house. He saw what she was doing and put on a sprint, but she was already inside and slamming the door. He put out one foot and wedged it in the closing gap. Siduri leaned the whole of her bulk behind the door. Gilgamesh yelped and withdrew his foot. The woman managed to pin the door shut with her great weight. "Go away, whoever you are!" Gilgamesh put his mouth close to the door and bellowed, "Let me in, or I'll smash your walls and kick your wine press into the sea. I'm Gilgamesh, king of Urk, slayer of Huwawa, and the bull of heaven." "No, you're not." "Yes, I am." "Not." "Am." "Not." "I've heard of Gilgamesh." She panted through the door, and his young and handsome, and all of the women of Urk swooned after him with his big dark eyes and his curly hair. "And you come along telling me you're Gilgamesh? You old candlewick!" Gilgamesh was taken back. He stepped away from the door, and Siduri, who had been pushing on it with all of her weight, spilled out of the door at his feet. But she was unrepentant. "Look at you," she said. "You look 104, and as if you've seen all the trouble of the world. Look as if you've walked half the world and slept out in all weathers without so much as a hat. All skin and bone and worry, that's you," she said accusingly. "Call yourself Gilgamesh of Uruk." "I am." "Not." "Am." "Not." "Am." "Look at yourself." So Gilgamesh did look into the bowl of skimmed grape juice, and even he doubted that the reflection looking back at him was Gilgamesh of Uruk. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes sunken into their sockets, his lips blistered by heat and chapped by cold. His beard was matted with filth, and his hair had turned snow white. He slapped the reflection into fragments. "Why shouldn't I be changed?" he said. "I've traveled half the world, and I have had troubles. You wouldn't understand. How could a woman understand? I had a friend. The best friend a man could have. His name was Enkidu, and I loved him. Now he's dead. I've just walked through 12 leagues of darkness, and unless I can find Utnapishtim, the far away, I shall die, just like Enkidu. Isn't that grief enough to change a man? During the wild and furious lament, Siduri had gotten to her feet. And bussed about writing tables and polishing a cup on her veil. "Sit down and have a drink," she said cozily. "A few raisins, look. Some good fresh bread. I baked it this morning." She hummed tunelessly and threw a rock at the seagulls stealing sardines from the drying rack. Gradually, Gilgamesh grew calmer and dried his tears with one paw of his lion skin. "Tell me how I can find Utnapishtim, woman," he said. "Get washed first, and have a bite to eat. It can't be had, you know." "What can't?" "This or immorality thing." She went and filled a beaker with seawater to throw at the skinny cats basking on her roof. "When the gods made us, they never meant us to last. No more than a loaf of bread or a chicken's egg. We was meant to grow up, grow old, and fall off the twig. You know what you ought to do. Find the paradise shore, not sit here wasting time." "Give up, my dear? Eat, drink, and be merry? Did you never hear that? Eat, drink, and be merry? Oh, I can recommend it. Honey cakes for breakfast, freshly grilled sardines for lunch, milk and pops after a supper of eggs, melon. Now, what did the gods ever intend that was better than a melon? Except 2 melons. A lobster, ooh! Who needs paradise? You're a long time dead. There's another true thing for you. You're a long time dead. Grab the day and run with it. What you ought to do is get married. Children, that's the shape of happiness. A little hand inside yours. Someone riding high up on your shoulders, laughing out loud. Friends, yes. But a good wife takes some bettering. Cherries in bed, someone to sit with in the shade, someone who can weather you even when you're sour as a lemon. Someone who thinks all your jokes are funny. Someone who knows what you like to eat after a hard day's whatever it is a king does. Someone who thinks you're as much of a hero for killing a cockroach as a dragon. Get married and have children. That's the way we foil the gods. I mean, what good would it do to live 1,000,000 years unhappy? The cats came coiling and moiling back into their favorite spots. Keep your advice for your customers. Just tell me where I can find Utnapishtim. Siduri stuck in air through her teeth, so her veil puckered against her mouth. Now he lives over the water, the other side of water of death, and no one crosses over there but Urshanabi, the ferryman. He fetches and carries things over to Paradise Shore. You could always ask him, but he won't take you anyway. against his terms of employment, see? Be better off giving up and going home. Seems to me it's the quality of life that matters, not how long it drags on. Shoo! Siduri lunged at the cats, flapping her skirts, sending them yowling and hissing down the beach. When she turned, Gilgamesh had gone. Siduri chose herself the fattest sardine, poured herself a cup of wine, and with her feet resting in the water bucket, ate lunch, flinging the fish head and tails to the cats and the seagulls, as they had known very well she would. She did it every day. Ocean, the edge of all geography, the margin of the known world. Out there, what monsters lurked under the brittle glass roof of moving water. Gilgamesh's fright fueled a spiting, ungovernable anger, even if he did not understand. Suddenly he saw it, bobbing on turquoise shallows amid the pincushion pines, a ferry to Paradise Shore. The ferryman was applying a coat of paint to the snake-headed prow. Well, thought Gilgamesh, it had to be done. He would do it, as he had always done things, his heroic violence. He would capture this boat, as he had captured the cities of the plains. So opening his mouth and emptying his mind, Gilgamesh ran down out of the trees, hollering and yelling and dragging his sword, pointing through the noisy pebbles. He hurtled up to his knees in the water and began smashing at the boat's stern. Over and over again he hacked at the pegs and pulley and cleats and magic symbols. Out of the corner of his eyes he was aware of the ferryman gaping at him. Missing his footing, Gilgamesh slipped on a weed-covered stone, and he sat down with a splash. The ferryman threw his paintbrush in the air. Now, what did you want to go and do that for? You have to take me over to Paradise Shore, Gilgamesh demanded. You have to take me to Utnapishtim, the faraway. Urshanabi covered his eyes with one hand. You've made good and sure I don't, haven't you? You just smashed the steering gear and the magic that drives her where the wind won't. Gilgamesh felt rather small. He pulled himself to his feet and declared that being a king gave him the right to smash boats, and when he saw fit. I am Gilgamesh of Uruk, slayer of Huwawa, and the bull of heaven. Then you must have fallen on hard times, says the ferryman. I heard you were young and full of life for your own good. And here you are, looking like the bones left on a gutting table after the catch is landed. What happened to you? So Gilgamesh told him. I had a friend. His name was Enkidu. And when the gods decreed he must die, I was made to look death in the face. And the sight terrified me. Terrified. I can't die like that. I can't die. Utnapishtim didn't, so he can tell me the secret of immortality. Little by little, the sloping sea washed all the bluster and aggression out of Gilgamesh, and he was left explaining himself, excusing himself. Don't be angry with me, ferryman. You go there every day. All I am asking is that you take me there once. Urshanabi shook his head, sunburnt head, and skipped a stone over the waves. You ask more than you know. But since the steering gear is smashed, I'll need you to cut 12 good long poles of wood from the tallest trees you can find. Then whittle and ream them so that they slot together, end to end. Can you do that? Can kings turn their heads to such work? Thing is, man of Uruk, the crossing takes us over the river of death. If you or I so much as dip one finger into the water or splash ourselves with its spray, we'll discover all the secrets of mortality, then there, quicker than was meant. Humbled, Gilgamesh did what he was told, though he could not tell why exactly they should need 12 poles of wood. He discovered soon enough, putting out to sea along the pathways left by the sinking sun, thinking every moment to tumble over the edge of the world. Gilgamesh was obliged to punt. One pole was long enough for a while to touch bottom, but soon two screwed together end to end were not long enough. He screwed on a third and a fourth, feeling the tip far below skid and skip over. What? The hulls of sunken ships? The shells of sleeping turtles? The skulls of drowned men? The scales of sea monsters? Soon 6 rods were not long enough. Sometime during the night they crossed into the sea lane, which thrummed and raced under the hull, making the boat roll and yaw till Gilgamesh was as green as a snake. "Don't let your hands touch the water," warned Urshanabi, and Gilgamesh knew that they were crossing the river of death. Not 7 nor 8 rods, not 9 or 10 were enough to touch the bottom of the deepest ocean trench. Gilgamesh screwed on the 11th, then the very last rod he had cut from the seaside forest. But Urshanabi had miscalculated. "It's not enough," he told the ferryman. The fast sea current was starting to carry the boat off course. What would happen if he was forced to push his hand and wrist into the waves in order to touch the bottom? Would the oily darkness seize on him like tar, or wash the life out of him through the palms of his blistered hands? Then he thought of the mast. But without a sail, how shall we break free of the current? Urshanabi protested as Gilgamesh hacked down the mast. "I shall be the mast," said Gilgamesh, using the mast for the 13th rod. Their punt pole was at last long enough to touch bottom, and Gilgamesh was able to punt on across the river of death, his hands staying clear of the water. Then Urshanabi took the punt pole, and Gilgamesh put on Urshanabi's shirt. His body was so wasted and thin that it flapped around him like a shroud. He stood amidships, arms stretched out to either side, and the west wind filled the shirt, which bellied out ahead of him. He thought he must be carried away by the wind, blown into the sky among the wheeling seagulls. "It can't be done, you know," Urshanabi called over his shoulder, casual, matter of fact. "The gods never meant people to live forever. Not your friend, not you, not me. You can ask Utnapishtim, but he'll tell you the same. You should stop fretting about death and settle for a good life. Do things you can look back on with pride. Make your mark in the world, by all means, but then pass the baton on to the next runner. That's the way of the world. Run with the baton, then pass it on." The boat slowed. Urshanabi turned and saw that Gilgamesh was no longer holding his arms at full stretch, but had his fingers in his ears, so as not to hear the ferryman's talk of giving up. This is Brenda Glass.